Expeditions, and as we sort of virtually travel to the Arctic.
Yes, we'll take you to the top of the world today, Lisa. It's going to go be a fun journey to explore even the largest island on the planet, which is Greenland. So I'm really excited to share some of my personal stories with you and more.
Lovely.
So thanks everyone for gathering virtually today. It's so nice seeing faces during this time and connecting, and also honestly dreaming about travel. I really do believe that us just dreaming and thinking about where we're going to be traveling later on, it experiences just as much happiness as actually traveling physically. So I'm excited for to share with you some of my personal stories. And my name is Cara Matthew. I've been working with a company called Quark Expeditions for over 12 years now. I really do feel like I have the polar bug, and I absolutely love where we go and what we do. And so when I started in 2008, someone had reached out to me and said, I would love for you to work for this company. You know that movie March of the Penguins with Morgan Freeman narrating? I said, yes, I love that movie. I saw that in 2005. And they said, well, this company travels to Antarctica and goes to emperor penguin rookeries to see emperor penguins. And I thought, I only realized when I knew that this company existed that people could actually travel to Antarctica, and tourism's there as well as the Arctic. I thought these areas were left for BBC film crew or scientists, photographers. So it's a really exciting to be able to go to the ends of the earth. And so with Quark Expeditions, we only go to the polar regions. We only go to the Arctic, Antarctica. We don't go anywhere else in the world. And that's really what sets us apart from the rest, because I know Lisa does work with a lot of other operators that you've probably traveled with that go to so many other areas of the world. But we only focus on the polar region. So we've been in business for over 30 years. We were actually the first company to take passengers to the North Pole in 1991, which is still a trip we do today. And we were the first company to fully circumnavigate Antarctica, the fifth largest continent, with travelers as well. So we are specialists in these regions. But today I want to talk about the Arctic, because a lot of people say, why would I want to go to the Arctic? What can I see and do there? And there are such incredible journeys in the land of the North. And I love maps. So I do have a few throughout the presentation because I love visualizing where and what countries are in the Arctic, because about 4 million people live north of the Arctic Circle at 66 degrees south and 66 degrees north, and inhabits like Greenland, which is beautiful. If you've cruised Alaska, please feel free to write in the chat functionality if you've cruised to Alaska, but Greenland should be next on your list. So Lisa, you have to. It's so beautiful. But if you loved the colossal glaciers and the mountain ranges, Greenland is that next step of beauty of ice and mountain ranges to cruise around in and also go hiking. But then we also have Spitsbergen, which I'll talk about, the Russian high Arctic, Novaya Zemlya. We also have the Canadian Arctic. You know, I live in Toronto. We are a US based company in Seattle. But even going farther north in the Canadian Arctic is absolutely beautiful. So all of these trips are small ships, all under 200 passengers. So small ships are the home base to maneuver in these regions because you can go further and farther with the ships. And some of these areas you actually can't get to by any other means of transportation. So just some fun facts. We go to the Arctic and travelers can explore this region in our North American summer. So we are going in the summer. So our trips start in May and go to the beginning of October. So because we only do polar travel, we're in these regions for a long period of time. So just depending on what you want to see and do, we go in different months throughout our summer and late fall. But I want to talk a little bit about the North Pole. We have 2 trips a year, June and July, that go to the North Pole. And this was my first Quark Expeditions experience. So standing at the top of the world. In 2010, I went. And it's the geographic North Pole that we go to, 90 degrees north. Santa Claus is not there when we go. That's a commonly asked question. He is usually fishing off the coast of Norway at this time. So I did not see him, but we did mail some postcards back to my nieces and nephews from the North Pole. But what's really fascinating about the North Pole is, unlike Antarctica, where Antarctica is landmass surrounded by water, the Arctic is water, so and a frozen ocean, with the Arctic Ocean surrounded by so many different countries, and that's a really big difference with going to the North Pole. So we're actually breaking through about 9 to 11 feet of ice to get to the top of the world. So there's actual, not sea days really, it's breaking through ice days. And it felt like a train. So this is not a luxurious ship by any means. It's a 127 passenger expedition, tried and true vessel. And Lisa and I were talking about the variety of our ships, because we have those luxurious vessels, but we also have those tried and true expedition ships as well. So we go to the top of the world, and I was actually proposed to on the bow of this ship, the 50 Years of Victory. And I got this mug, and coincidentally, I'm using my mug that I got on my trip today with you for my coffee. So it's a remarkable destination because it's 24 hours of sunlight. So it's the midnight sun with a lot of these trips that I'm talking about today, which is quite neat. But on route to the North Pole, I was able to see some polar bears, walrus. So we really, no matter what ship you're on, we encourage people to get out on deck as much as possible, because you never know what you're going to catch a glimpse of. But at the North Pole, there's hot air ballooning. There's even a phone booth that we set up with the with the satellite phone. So who would you phone if you were at the top of the world? Think about that one. I loved having a barbecue on board. This isn't my polar plunge photo. I will show you mine in Greenland, but it's minus 2.5 degrees Celsius water in the Arctic Ocean. And so we were able to do the polar plunge. We do the polar plunge on every voyage, something that people don't always participate in, but everyone has just as much fun watching. Our average age is about 60, and our minimum age is 8 years old on all of our trips. But I also traveled with an 86-year-old in Greenland who didn't get off the ship once. So it can be as active or as leisure as you want any of these trips to be. But on the way back from the North Pole, I was able to stop in Franz Josef Land, the archipelago of 191 islands in Russia. And if you notice on this vessel, there is a helicopter, if you can kind of see at the stern of the ship there. And so we've been operating helicopters in the polar regions longer than anyone else. And I love the opportunities for aerial views, because heli sightseeing is included on all of our trips with helicopters. So with Russia, again, I love maps because we start in Helsinki in Finland with this trip. So Lisa can absolutely form other trips in Helsinki, maybe, or even Estonia around these trips, because I loved going to Estonia and seeing areas of Finland just as much as going to the North Pole. Just beautiful areas of the world. So definitely inquire with Lisa about areas of Estonia and Finland in general. But Spitsbergen is generally the most popular destination in the Arctic. So if you think of the Arctic, a lot of people are thinking of Spitsbergen. And so Spitsbergen is known as the realm of the polar bear. And some fun facts, I didn't know this until quite a few years ago, but Spitsbergen is the main island of an archipelago of islands off the coast of Norway. So right in the heart of the Arctic Circle. And so, fun fact, Spitsbergen is the main island, but the archipelago is called Svalbard. So you might hear interchangeably Svalbard, Spitsbergen, but Svalbard is actually the whole region off the coast of Norway. So they are Norwegian islands, and a fantastic place to see the polar bear. I went and did this trip in 2019, and it was spectacular, and a great price point, a great place to do intergenerational family travel, or if you're into wildlife in general or birding. I highly recommend exploring Spitsbergen one day. What I loved is not only the realm of the polar bear, there's over 24,000 polar bears in the world. And yes, again, I'm from Canada, Manitoba, like going to Churchill in Manitoba is great. But there was something amazing about the polar bears in Spitsbergen, because there's more polar bears that live in this region than people. So the chances of the polar bear sighting on the comfort of the vessel or in the safety of the small little Zodiacs, you're not in a tundra buggy, you're not driving around on land, you're actually experiencing them from sea. And if you can take a look at the feet, so these paws, they're webbed feet. So the polar bear has webbed feet because they're an adaptation of swimming now with the feet, because they are swimmers. They're considered a marine mammal now. So when I was on my trip in 2019, we were having an amazing lunch in our dining room because it's a small ship with everyone dining at the same time, but we got interrupted. And the expedition leader came on the loudspeaker and said, "Everyone, there is a male polar bear out on the sea ice. I encourage you to quietly grab your parkas and your boots and come out on deck because they're very good listeners and they're very good sense of smell. So they could probably smell our lunch when we opened up the doors to get out on deck." And this polar bear was hunting a seal, a bearded seal out on the sea ice. And half the ship was going for the polar bear and half the ship was going for a seal. The tension, you could just cut it with a knife because everyone was so excited of what would happen. And the polar bear ended up going behind a snow mound of ice from the pressure ridge of the ice and covered in snow and was hiding and all of a sudden darted out and went after the seal. Well, the seal actually ended up getting away and slipped under the sea ice. And everyone just, it was an incredible experience. I thought I was watching a BBC documentary. It was absolutely wonderful. So that was one of my highlights of my Spitsbergen trip. But it's not only considered the realm of the polar bear, it is the wildlife capital of the Arctic for many other reasons. And I also don't talk about the scenery enough. It's so beautiful. But I love wildlife. So I enjoyed seeing walrus, and I was actually smelling the walrus before I could see them on a landing with a walrus haul out. They're very smelly creatures and they're very noisy. So we keep a very safe distance away from all the wildlife because we are in their natural habitat. We are in their territory. But also, I was never a birder until I started traveling with Quark Expeditions. And on my trip, I'd seen a puffin for the first time. I know they're on the east coast of Canada, and I know that they're in Iceland, but I had never seen a puffin before. So on the west portion of Spitsbergen, I saw some great puffins on cliffs, and then also seeing them dive into the water was hilarious because they're not graceful landers. So when they're coming in for a landing off the cliff, it was not graceful at all when they landed in the ocean. It was quite funny. So that was very amusing. I just loved seeing these little guys. But also a big highlight was Kittiwake Canyon. So we have very amazing educational components to our trip with expedition guides. So we have glaciologists, biologists, geologists, and our guides are actually the ones that are driving the Zodiac. So when you're traveling with us, they're in the Zodiacs. It's not the ship crew that are driving the Zodiacs. And this is really special because on the way to a canyon called Kittiwake Canyon, I was able to ask the guide a lot of things about birds. And now, after being with our ornithologist, I even have my own binoculars and I go into my own park in Toronto here in High Park. I walk down there and I even bring my binoculars to find out birds and I send them to some of our ornithologists. Look at what this woodpecker or this Baltimore Oriole hasn't been in Toronto for so long. And I became a little bit of a birder myself now. So Kittiwake Canyon was incredible because we were sitting in this area very quietly after we walked in, and there were so many birds. I'd never seen so many birds in all my life. And I was in such awe that I had my mouth open. And our ornithologist said, "Listen, you got to close your mouth because you are going to get a surprise in your mouth if you keep your mouth open, because the chances of something landing in there are very great." But this Kittiwake Canyon was incredible with all these kittiwakes. So if you don't know what a kittiwake is, highly recommend looking up this incredible bird that you could see in the Arctic. So if you're a birder, or even if you're not, you will become one on one of our Spitsbergen trips. But I also loved reindeer. I loved seeing them eat and munch on the grass. And I didn't realize that female reindeer are actually the ones that keep their antlers during the winter. So it's probably a female reindeer that is actually leading Santa's sleigh. I just fun fact about reindeer. I also saw beluga whales on my trip in Spitsbergen. It was the last landing. I had actually, I was quite tired. It was a 14-day trip. We do have shorter trips, but I wanted to like pack and get ready and enjoy being on board and having a cup of tea that morning and what have you. And I'm so glad at the last minute I jumped into the Zodiacs because we saw a pod of beluga whales, the canaries of the sea. So you can see belugas in the Canadian Arctic as well and so many other areas, but I love seeing them in Spitsbergen, in the shallow waters of Spitsbergen. Also fin whales I did see in Spitsbergen too. So if you're love watching whales, it's an opportunity to get out on board with your binoculars. And what I love too is our expedition team are on the lookout 24/7 on the bridge searching for wildlife. So we take shifts, and no other company is doing this 24 hours a day, so that if you're not out on deck looking for wildlife, we are. And so we can even wake everyone up at 4 in the morning. We got woken up gently by our biologist because there were two polar bear cubs with her mother out on the sea ice. And so we got gently woken up. Some people slept in, which was totally fine, but I got up with my pajama bottoms and went out on deck to see them for about an hour, and then I went back to bed. So just again with maps, these are the islands of Svalbard. So Spitsbergen is the main island. So there's small little trips of 10 days, 7 days that we can do. So if you're thinking of maybe going to France at some point in the future, 2022 or 23, great opportunity to team up even a 7-day trip with Spitsbergen. But we also have 12 days, so more opportunities to see wildlife and polar bears. But this is the 14-day trip that I did, just full circumnavigation of Spitsbergen. And then sometimes we can get over to the northeast and Kittiwake and other areas and other islands of Svalbard. So great places to discover. Greenland, though, was never on my list of places to visit. Never. It was never on my radar. It was something that I flew over when I went to travel to the UK or other areas of Europe when I was younger. And this Greenland is stunning. It's the largest island on the planet, known for its community visits. People have been inhabiting Greenland for over 3,000 years. But I love cruising in the fjords, gorgeous mountain ranges, beautiful icebergs. And I loved being on the bridge with our captain because all of our ships have open bridge policies. And I saw the captain maneuvering around all these icebergs. And we have been the company that have gone the furthest and farthest into these fjords in East Greenland more than any other operator. We went further and farther, and it was absolutely spectacular seeing the captain at his craft that have been in the polar regions for over 40 years captaining one of our vessels. So it's just incredible. But I'm also a hiker, so if you enjoy hiking, there's longer hikes for 4 and 6 hours. But also I love the contemplative walks in Greenland too, and just walking around with some of our birders or our biologists sharing some wildlife with seals that you can see maybe that have come up onto the shores. So again, for any active traveler, if you're someone who's really active, these trips are for you. But if you're someone who's a leisure traveler and simply loves looking at the wildlife and scenery, these trips are for you as well. But these are the little Zodiacs, the little rubber boats that we use to get around. And so they're open air, great for not only seeing the wildlife as well as the scenery, but we also use them to transport everyone onto the landings. And these yellow parkas that you see, they are a gift from Quark. So when you come and travel with us, you get a parka. And I even used mine for shoveling and walking my dog in these Toronto snowy days that we have right now. So they're great keepsake for when you come back from your trip. They come with a removable liner. And then we also supply muck boots. So really great Canadian muck boots. They're waterproof and durable and warm. So not only for getting around in and out of the Zodiacs, but also I love just keeping my feet warm in the Zodiac for those Zodiac cruises and bundling up a little bit more. But the west portion of Greenland is stunning. Home to World UNESCO heritage sites. The fjords have glaciers in them, like Cermak Kittiwake Glacier, gorgeous, stunning glaciers of every imaginable size. And it's known that the icebergs that are in the Atlantic have come from Greenland. So that just gives you a size of the magnitude of the glaciers for these huge icebergs, and not to mention the Titanic, but I will. It's known that the iceberg that hit the Titanic came off of a glacier from West Greenland. So beautiful ice-choked fjords in these regions. I just never get sick of ice and seeing the beautiful ice formations. So East Greenland is where I went. And so I need to go back and go to West Greenland and South Greenland now because there's just so much to see and it's so different. So I went to Scoresby Sun Fjord and King Oscar Fjord on the east portion. But I also went into community visit Itakormarit. And I loved going into the museums and also mingling with the locals. I also bought some art, a little stone sculpture and some beaded work. So it was really neat having a community visit on my trip as well in Greenland. So muskoxen. Feel free to write in the chat functionality if you know the mammal that is closely related to the muskoxen. And so muskoxen is known for its very soft wool. And what's neat is locals in Greenland and the Canadian Arctic, we can find muskoxen. They collect the hair without actually killing the animal. It's wool that can come off and it's very soft. I was in Banff hiking and I went into the Fairmont in Banff, and even in a gift shop, they sell ear warmers and toques and scarves and gloves, and it's just so soft. It's like butter. But the muskoxen is related to, I thought it was the buffalo for the horns, but it's actually the sheep family. So when I came back on board, our biologist did a little bit of a explanation, a 20-minute presentation on the muskoxen, and I found out that they were related to the sheep. I was very eager though, and I put up my hand thinking it was the buffalo. So that's just a great fact and information that I learned on my trip. So these muskoxen, we were going on a really short hike, but we had to be very, very quiet because the wildlife in the Arctic, unlike Antarctica, there's wildlife at every turn. But in the Arctic, they're very skittish, a lot of wildlife. So the muskoxen are very skittish and will run very quickly. So we came up over a ridge very quietly, and there are about 12 of us in our group. And our expedition team members said, let's all be very quiet. And we sat for about 20 minutes watching these muskoxen over this ridge. And we were very quiet and we just loved seeing the muskoxen. And then we went on our merry way. So it's neat, half the fun and I love with expedition, half the fun of the expedition is searching for the wildlife. And then when you see something, it's just extra exciting. I am not a photographer, so excuse these photos, but these are my photos from Greenland when I saw an Arctic fox. And so depending on the year, the time of year, so I went in September, the sun sets at around 9 or 10 at night, but during the day, the Arctic fox has shed its coat. So they're white and brown, but closer to the full summer in May and June and coming into the heart of the Arctic summer, their coats are brown. So they do molt and shed, and so they I saw them when they were almost pretty much brown and white. So again, we were very quiet. We were having a moment of silence, and this Arctic fox came out of its den and ran right across our small contemplative group of walkers. So this is my polar plunge photo. I did do it in the Arctic, in the North Pole. I did do it in Greenland as well. So this was in a little fjord called Hare Fjord. Beautiful sunny day in this fjord, very calm. And so after a long hike, I thought, what the heck? I was there was an 18-year-old traveler whose dad gave her this Greenland trip as a present for her high school graduation. And so she said, you know what, you promised me one night at dinner that you were going to do it, when I was mingling with her and her dad at dinner. And I said, okay, you know what, I will. So I did it with her and we had a ball. So I'm really glad I did it. I don't do it on all of our trips, but they have them in spas now, the cold pools. So you go from the hot pool to the cold pool. So it's actually apparently very, very therapeutic. South Greenland should be on people's radar now. I know Iceland's beautiful. It's a wonderful place to visit. It is getting all overpopulated though with tourism. So highly recommend, if you haven't seen Iceland, to go for a few days, but hop over to South Greenland as well. A lot of history with Viking history. And so this is a great opportunity to do a lot of history in Greenland. I love the mountain ranges too in South Greenland, just spectacular. And now with our 2 helicopters on our ultramarine ship, which I'll talk about in a moment, with heli sightseeing included, the aerial views are just stunning. And then opportunities for heli landings. Again, if you're not a hiker, you can still do a heli landing just to get a different perspective of the glaciers that you might have seen from the comfort of the zodiacs. If you haven't seen the Northern Lights, or even if you have, Greenland is a spectacular place to see them. In September, the sun setting, like I was saying, at around 9 or 10 at night. So I was able to see them in September. And we do have designated Greenland Northern Lights itineraries as well. But it's not just the highlight of the trip. I loved seeing them in September, but also seeing lots of different wildlife during the day. So end of August, September, early October, fantastic time to see them. So if you are thinking about going to Greenland in the future, look at trips at the end of August, September, and early October. You not only can see them from the comfort of your own balcony suite if you have them. I didn't have a balcony on my trip, so I did join people on deck, and we got, again, woken up at around 1 in the morning. Some people stayed up around 11, had an extra cup of coffee, maybe a shot of Bailey's in it to stay up, and they enjoyed being one of the first to glimpse the Northern Lights on the trip. So you can stay out on deck if you want, but if you go to bed, not to worry, we will gently wake everyone up to experience this. So Greenland, we go in July, August, and September to the beginning of October. So just again, depends what people want to see and do. So our South Greenland trips focused on South Greenland is starting at 9 days. So we fly over from Iceland on day 1, and then we fly back to Iceland on day 8 with an included night hotel in Iceland. And then you can either come back to North America or see more of Iceland. Definitely Lisa can share with you more tips on Iceland as well for some land-based programs, which are fantastic. So this is a great trip in July. And we have these trips in 2021 because there are no COVID cases right now in Greenland. And I know that's what's on everyone's mind right now is COVID, of course. But if you are thinking of traveling this summer, Greenland is currently open. So we do have an amazing book with confidence policy, which I'll share with you too. But we do have these trips in 2022 and then in 2023 as well. So Essential Greenland is one of my favorite trips because it's not only doing a little bit of South Greenland, but also West Greenland as well. So if you want to stay for a little bit longer, that's for you. I wanted to share a bit about the Canadian Arctic. I was telling Lisa, I did a presentation on Wednesday night on just the Canadian Arctic alone because there's so much to talk about with all of these destinations. But why not follow in the footsteps of legendary explorers? If you're in Canada here, I love CBC radio. And when Franklin's shipwreck was found, this is a big highlight. And I think CBC was covering it so much with Franklin's shipwreck that we do go to Beechey Island on a lot of our Arctic trips. Whether you're into history or not, it's an amazing place to share the graves of 3 graves of the Franklin expedition. So they didn't know where Franklin planned to sail the next season when they found these grave sites. They don't know where they were going next. But this last landing for the ships before they disappeared is where they found some bones of some of the explorers. There's also another grave site there as well of someone that wasn't in the Franklin expedition, but this was Franklin's Erebus and Terror in 1848. And so I believe the bodies were found in 1950. So not quite a long time after the Erebus and Terror expedition. But also Port Leopold is fun because it was an abandoned outpost for the Hudson's Bay Company. So back in the 1920s, it's a really important site. So it's fun to be able to see places that were either outposts or some scientific sheds in these areas. It's just a wonderful place to explore. And those on the bottom right screen too are actual bow head whales bones. So really neat to see lots of artifacts. And there was also, like Greenland, there's also Thule people that lived in the Canadian Arctic. So it's neat to see Thule ruins as well of the Thule people and how they built their homes. There were holes dug in, and then they built their homes in these holes. So about 15 to 20 family members would live, and it's neat seeing that kind of thing in the Canadian Arctic as well. It's amazing to know that people have been able to survive in the Arctic for thousands of years. It's just incredible. But again, wildlife and scenery are a highlight. And so we can find beluga whales, polar bears in the Canadian Arctic, lots of whales. A commonly asked question are narwhals. Now, some of you might be thinking about narwhals, and it is possible, especially on our Canada's remote Arctic trip or Arctic Express, it is possible to see narwhals. We have seen them in the past. I don't talk about them a lot because they are very skittish. They know they're being hunted. They have very good hearing and sound vibrations with their tusks. So with the narwhals, we sometimes try and turn off all the engines on the ships and the Zodiacs, and there has been opportunities to see narwhals. So in 2019 and 2017, we did have guests that did see them. So if just in case if you're curious about seeing them. I actually have a narwhal magnet that I made myself because I haven't seen them yet. So hopefully this summer or next summer, I can get an opportunity to go up there and maybe catch a glimpse of them. I have Paul Nicolin's photo of the narwhals with the crossing of the tusks on my fridge. I cut it out from a National Geographic magazine and just stuck it on a magnet and made one myself. So lots of wildlife opportunities too in the Canadian High Arctic, and walrus as well. But a highlight is the Indigenous communities. So we have opportunities to visit communities. We're looking right now at a lot of the areas like Nunavut and Baffin Bay for inoculations, so getting vaccinations for the communities there as well. So that's been a commonly asked question that I've received right now, but they usually come on board. We have some great locals that come on board, but we also have, we go into the communities and see these are two in the middle. These amazing women are throat singers. I also see drummers. We also go and see, have like seal. Some people were able to get offered seal and try seal. I did not try seal, but it's amazing to interact with the locals, and that's a big highlight of the Canadian Arctic. So we travel again in the high Arctic in the summer for Canada, but August, so the heart of our summer in August, and then into September. So we go there because at this time, because the ice is broken up enough, even though we are on fantastic ice strengthened hulls and icebreaker ships in these areas in the Arctic, it's nice to have the ice broken up a little bit more, because even icebreakers, when the ice is drifting, and the ice is after 24 hours, the ice, when it's been broken through, can seal up again. So that's definitely, and the shift of the currents brings ice in. So that's a great opportunity to see the Canadian Arctic on small ships in August. Highly recommend August and September. We're getting off the ship as much as possible in the Arctic, but what I love is if you're interested in traveling there, and maybe you're not a cruiser, maybe you've never been on a ship before, and that's okay, or even if you are a traditional cruiser, what I love is some of these trips are completely protected by open water. So for instance, Northwest Passage trips, they used to be 30 days, but after a lot of guest feedback, we started doing smaller and shorter trips now. So you can do chunks of the Northwest Passage in about 17 days. So there is a sea day here crossing from Greenland into the Canadian Arctic Baffin Island. But if you get seasick like me, I love sticking to some of our 9 and 12-day trips where you can just maneuver around some of the islands in the Canadian Arctic, see the highlights, but you can still say that you've cruised some of the Northwest Passage. We position the ship during the night, so when we're all sleeping, and then you can get to another destination in the Arctic the next morning or that afternoon. So Devon Island, this island here, I usually share it on my bigger presentations, but Devon Island is the largest uninhabited island on the planet. So I was thinking maybe one was in Fiji when I went to Fiji, or Tahiti, but no, the largest uninhabited island on the planet is Devon Island in our Canadian Arctic. And then we have 12-day trips leaving right from Toronto. So currently we do have trips in 2021 this summer, and next summer we haven't canceled our Arctic season at this time because they leave right from Toronto. We have a charter flight. We fly up to Resolute, and then we embark the ship that afternoon in Resolute. And then on day 11 on this particular trip, we come back to Toronto, have an included night. And I always recommend too, if you're living in Toronto or you're living in Ottawa, to still take advantage, or maybe you're coming up from Detroit or other areas of Michigan, or even Chicago and Illinois, I always recommend still staying in Toronto that night because that evening we have a briefing. It's nice to mingle with people for dinner, and then we sometimes leave really early in the morning because it is our charter flight. So sometimes we leave really early on day 2. If you're like me and love Greenland as well, I would highly recommend this trip because then it's the best of both worlds, seeing the west portion of Greenland as well as some great Canadian highlights of the Canadian Arctic. So if you're only thinking of doing the Canadian Arctic once and maybe only Greenland once, this is the trip for you. So there is so much to see and do in the Arctic alone. Again, our season goes from May until the beginning of October. This is a great time to go into these areas because it's not as cold as people think it is. When I was in Greenland, the average temperature was 7 degrees Celsius because I was going in the beginning of September. When the wind isn't blowing and there's no wind chill and the sun's shining, it can get actually quite warm. And in Spitsbergen, when I went at the end of July, it was the average temperature was around 2 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius. And again, 24 hours of daylight in Spitsbergen for me. So it's not as cold as people think it is when we're traveling there. A huge differentiator with Quark Expeditions and why a lot of people choose Quark are adventure options. We have more adventure options in the polar region than any other operator. And so lots is included, like the Zodiac cruising, the polar plunge that I was talking about earlier, heli sightseeing and hiking. And everyone can get off the ship at the same time with our ships. So highly recommend if you're thinking about expedition ship travel in the future, chat with Lisa about the small ship opportunities under 200 passengers. Because if you like to get off the ship as much as possible and be in the heart of these destinations, the small ships are really important with ships that are 125, 176 passengers. As soon as you have ships that are 250, 300, and 500 passengers, great cruising experience and excellent vessels, but you are not getting off the ship at the same time with everyone else. So that's a big benefit to traveling with Quark. But don't forget to ask Lisa about the additional adventure options. So even though so much is included, and if you don't have an additional adventure option, don't worry, because my first few Quark trips, I didn't do anything extra and I was just filled with so much to do. And I even went traveling with my 66-year-old aunt, and one afternoon she simply stayed on board, enjoyed happy hour, went through her photos from the morning, and I went out for a long hike and came back and had dinner with her, and we were able to share our experiences. So even if you don't do a paid adventure option, there's so much to see and do, but they do fill up quickly. So in the Arctic, we have even paddling if you're a paddler, or even if you've never paddled before, we have the inflatable kayaks. But if you are an avid kayaker, we have an in-depth kayaking program where you kayak as much as possible throughout the trip. And we have incredible expedition guides that will go out with people. And this is why they're additional, because we're supplying all the equipment and we hire the top of the line guides to go with you. And so I was in Spitsbergen doing the inflatable kayaking paddling experience, and I have had no experience paddling. I'm very little, let alone the polar regions. And my expedition guide, she had solo kayak New Zealand, both islands. And I was so neat paddling and being like, I can't believe you did this by yourself in New Zealand. Like, that's amazing. So just being around really inspiring individuals with all of our, not only our paid adventure options, but our included adventure options. Our expedition team is really what sets us apart from the rest as well. We have the best guides in the industry, hands down. That's one of the reasons why I've been with this company for over 12 years. I really do believe it's not only where we're traveling to, but who we're traveling with. I did an African safari. I went to Kenya in 2018 and I absolutely loved it. But it was the guides that really enhanced the experience as well. And so that's what I kind of compare it to, an African safari, having not, really in-depth knowledgeable guides. And it's one expedition team member to 7 passengers. It's the lowest in the industry. So that's, again, not crew, ship crew, that's expedition guides alone. And they'll even sit with you during dinners and lunches throughout the expedition. And so you really can approach them at any time if you wish, and mingle with them on board and off the ship as well. We have a fantastic Quark Academy program. So we have an in-depth training program for our guides. So everyone is trained at the caliber, even if they've come with different companies and have lots of experience in the polar regions. We want to make sure that everyone is at this high caliber of safety in these regions. So just to touch a little bit on these ships, I'm sure a few of you are questioning our ships and wondering what they look like. So you can always ask Lisa for more information, but our icebreaker, our full icebreaker, this is the most powerful icebreaker on the planet, 75,000 horsepower. And this is that ship that goes right to the North Pole with us. And she is a working vessel throughout the rest of the year, breaking through the Northeast Passage for container ships and such. And so it's just know that traveling on this type of ship, it's not a luxurious vessel. The luxury is certainly the destination of being on the top of the world. So this is a working ship. But we do have luxurious vessels too. We have our new ultramarine ship, and then we have our beloved ocean adventurer. That's a Trident II expedition ship. But our new ultramarine just did her sea trials last week in Croatia. Something great that's happening during this pandemic. The shipyard Brodo Split did not shut down. So the crew were able to keep working on her, and our senior vice president of operations is in Croatia through this time. And I can't wait to show you actual pictures soon because we'll have real pictures. This is a rendering. But the Ultramarine will set sail this summer, and it's the only expedition ship designed specifically for polar travel, because remember, that's all that we do is polar travel. And so she is best in class operational range as well. And what this means is when you're seeing the trips that you can fly up to the Canadian high Arctic, like Resolute, for instance, she can stay up there for like 60 days without refueling because we have great engines on her and she can stay up there. Really low impact too for the environment. We're huge on sustainability. And so this ship will get all of our passengers off the ship even faster. So you'll be, sometimes it can be hot and heavy waiting to get off the ship when you're all bundled up in your parka and your gloves, but we can get everyone off even faster on the Ultramarine. We have forward disembarkation points on the stern. And look how easy it is to get into this too. It's one step into the Zodiac, and we'll have one expedition team member in the Zodiac, one expedition team member and a ship crew member on the actual ship helping people get in and out. So I've traveled with a 99-year-old too, who really was mobile and loved hiking. And then again, that 86-year-old that I mentioned that didn't get off the ship once. But if you're worried about expedition and what that means and thinking it's too out of the box, it's honestly for every type of traveler, someone who wants to really get out of their comfort zone. But I think it's just adventurous enough getting into the Zodiac and cruising around and getting back on board. And we have a great spa on board too, a fantastic mud room. We have all outside cabins. And if you're a solo traveler wanting to travel and can't find anyone to travel with, we also have solo cabins. But we also have balcony suites and owner suites. So just depending on your level of comfort with spa-inspired bathrooms. She is known as a wellness ship too. So we have yoga on board, beautiful dining experience. The food is incredible on our ships. Just because it's expedition, it's not the hot dogs and hamburgers all the time. It's a fantastic cuisine too. But another little expedition vessel that I love, she's one of our expedition team member favorites, is the Ocean Adventure. We've had her in our fleet for over 14 years. We renovated her with the ship owner because we don't own this particular ship, but we helped renovate her in 2017 for your comfort level. Great expedition vessel, 132 passengers, a great little expedition ship. Great suites though too, and deluxe suites. But if you're traveling with your family or a friend, we have great little twin cabins too that are just only 120 square feet. But a lot of people don't spend time in their cabins. They're out on deck, or they're in the lounge meeting people, or they're in the bar, or they're having meals. So you're not in your cabin a lot. So if you do choose the Ocean Adventurer, great price points with porthole cabins and twin cabins as well. So on board, there's not only libraries on our ships and exercise rooms and chef prepared meals, but there's also educational programs throughout the trip. So we have our glaciologists, ornithologists, historians giving short presentations throughout the voyage for what you're going to see and what you've already seen. I love the daily briefings in the lecture hall or in the bar at the end of the day, right before dinner. We all get together and you can always ask questions to the expedition team. But I loved getting in-depth knowledge of what we've seen and then also what we're going to see the next day, because it is an expedition, because it's not a traditional cruise and we're not following a traditional cruise line onboard itinerary. There are some mornings where our expedition leader that evening, the evening before, will say the next morning is actually TBA, because we don't know what we're going to find in this area. And so one morning, we actually planned to go on a landing and it was really foggy, the F word. We used the F word as the fog word on board. And we were all going out on the landing, which was planned, but we actually had to come on board 20 minutes later in Spitsbergen because we were in the realm of the polar bear. And with the fog, you can't see the polar bear as well. And so we all had to come back on board because the kayakers had spotted a polar bear. So that's an example of, even though we don't stick to a strict itinerary, which is part of the expeditionary spirit, and weather can change at the heart of a dime. So there's lots of onboard learning too, not only in the lecture theaters and in the bars, but also on deck, because being out on deck is the best viewing platform for wildlife and scenery. I loved having the expedition team, like for instance, the polar bear specialist, when we saw that male bear out on the sea ice hunting the seal. It was neat having the expedition polar bear specialist chat and walk around quietly and share some of the pointers and share if this was a male bear or not. So it's a great opportunity for wildlife viewing just on deck in and of itself. And also connecting with like-minded individuals. I love meeting other fellow Canadians on board. I met some people from Sweden. I met some people from the States. So it was great meeting people from all over the world and Australians. So just depending on where people were coming from, it was nice to connect with like-minded individuals on board. So again, can't stress enough, the food is good. You might ask Lisa, is it really good? And yes, there are dietary requirements on board that we can, alter our food if you need vegetarian options or vegan options or gluten-free. But there were times where I sat for dinner and I saw fish options and beef options, and I asked if I could have a little bit of both, and the chef prepared a little bit of both on my plate. We have a very comprehensive sustainability strategy in the polar regions. We came out with our Polar Promise in 2019. So please reach out to Lisa if you want our public document. That is our sustainability report. We try and update this every year. And in 2017, we eliminated single-use plastics. And in 2019, we eliminated emissions with our fleet by 28%. And so with our new ship, even the Ultramarine has a MEGS gasification system where we're even reducing onboard waste by 95% with food scraps and cardboard on board and that sort of thing. But we also are huge with the locals. We partner with Greenlandic communities, we partner with Canadian communities, and we actually say, do you want us in these areas? Do you want small ships? Do you want us visiting you and learning about these areas? And so we've really partnered with the communities and asking them what they want and really supporting these areas, because that's a big piece of sustainability as well. And long before COVID, passenger health and safety has been #1 for us. So small ship cruising is really important, always to wash your hands going to the dining room. So we were doing that long before. Even temperature checks in last January, when we were still operating in Antarctica right before the pandemic, we were hearing waves of this virus, and we were doing temperature checks even in January. So long before it was a requirement, long before people needed to wash their hands going into dining rooms or going in and out of Zodiacs, our protocols were incredible. And so you will have peace of mind exploring the polar regions with us. Please let Lisa know if you want. We just came out with a video of even more in-depth protocols on board that we'll be having not only this summer, but long after all the people are getting vaccinated and travel is up and running even more again. So please reach out to Lisa if you'd like some more of that information. We have a fantastic Book with Confidence too. So of course, in 2022, if you book a trip for that far in advance, we have amazing Book with Confidence policies. So you can cancel up to 24 hours before your trip. So if you're thinking of traveling maybe to Antarctica with us in January of 2022, or maybe you're thinking of September of going in Greenland this September, we have no rebooking fees. We have money back guarantees. We have lots of early booking bonuses and combinable offers. And there's no better time to start planning a trip to the polar regions, whether it's the Arctic or Antarctica, than now. A lot of people book these trips far in advance anyway. That's nothing new from this pandemic that's going on right now. People, it's like an African safari. I booked my trip, I'd planned my African safari 7 years before I did that Kenya trip. Just like the polar region, sometimes it's 18, 24 months out before people go there. So please reach out to Lisa, even if this is something on your list that was maybe 10 years in advance, but now you're thinking of going to one of these areas 3 years from now. Reach out to Lisa and we can answer any of your concerns or questions and help you plan in advance, even if you aren't going in the immediate future. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm just so polar passionate, and there's so much to talk about. So I just wanted to share with you some of my highlights of the polar regions, and there's so much to see. I haven't even been to so many areas of the Arctic alone that we go to. So please reach out to Lisa if you have any other questions. Lisa and I can always get on a phone call with you or do this Zoom type of call with you if you have any questions or want to go in depth with anything. But Lisa, thank you so much for having me today. It's just such a great series that you're doing here on Fridays to dream of travel and talk about travel. I just love it. It's my passion, traveling anywhere in the world.
Well, I want to thank you, Cara. Thank you so much, because this has just been captivating for me. I've attended one of your Zoom calls in the past. I was so looking forward to today. It is just fascinating. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, you'd be happy to answer. We did have one from Sean. He was wondering if you are allowed to do climbing on any of the icebergs.
Oh, that is such a great question, because in Antarctica, we have mountaineering, mountain climbing. In the Arctic, we don't have, for instance, a mountaineering program because of the fact that we're going in the heart of the summer. So there's not, on a lot of the landing sites, a lot of the snow has melted when we're going to the Arctic. So with the icebergs, we try and stay a safe distance away from the actual icebergs. But some glaciers we can safely walk on. So great question, Sean, because our Greenland program, get Lisa to share our Greenland Adventure program, because you can actually walk on the Greenland ice sheet, mountaineer on that. So that might be something that you want to look into for Greenland on our 9-day trip. Great question.
Yeah. Any others? Just you can unmute yourself and jump in if you like. And if not, of course, you can always email me and I'd be more than happy to answer you. And if I can't answer you, I will just reach out to Cara.
Yes. I would love to hear from any of you after this. And I know too, on the weekend, you might be thinking of it or sharing it with your friends, what you've seen a bit here today. So even if Lisa gets more questions from you next week or the week after, thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder what happens with a walrus haul out, and are you guaranteed to see them, or any fun fact questions as well. I'd love to hear from Lisa, because she's heard from you.
Okay, so just to let you know, if anyone wants a copy of this, please do reach out and let me know. I will send you the link. And it seems to be a very popular subject. People, well, come on. It's a very passionate thing. It's out of the ordinary. It's an expedition. It's informative. It's just amazing. I can't wait to go. I've always wanted to go to Greenland, but I don't know about the North Pole. I might have to add that on my to-do list.
I love it. Definitely out of the box indeed.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I want to thank everyone for joining me. And Cara, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out this morning and sharing your passion for both the poles. It's been wonderful, and everybody have an absolutely lovely weekend.
Be well, everyone.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.